יש עדיין שכונים.
זה מתנה בשבילך מעומרי. כן, זה מתוק, כל שאנחנו נביא לא.
באמת,
הבן שלך השתתף מאוד יפה היום. היה לנו סשן בחטיבת הביניים. תומר בא ודיבר, היה דיון מדהים.
בדרך כלל הוא לא אומר שהוא כל כך מעוניין בדברים בתוך יום של פרסמן, והוא חזר היום שהיה מרתק. אני לא ביקשתי את זה.
מדהים. בוא ניתן לזה עוד כמה דקות.
החנייה זה...
כן, סיפור. אבל יש טרנאוט מאוד טוב.
מאוד טוב. ליום שני בערב, יובל, באמת?
כן, כי ג'ייקוב אמר לי 40, 50... אמר לו, ג'ייקוב, אנחנו מכוונים למעל 100.
There's still some people who are parking. We don't want anyone to miss out.
Not sure.
Which means you can still continue talking. You don't have to quiet down yet.
Sorry.
Jacob, are more people still coming in? Are we? 2 minutes. 2 minutes. While we're waiting, if you haven't yet, please turn off your cell phones or at least silence your ringers.
Can you bring that in? Yeah. His bag is here.
Okay, we'll start. We know there's still people who are coming in, but we want to reward those who came on time. Erev Tov, everyone. Good to see you all. Really, thank you for coming out on a Monday night. You didn't come here to hear from me, and mostly tonight you will not hear from me, but it should not surprise you that I want to begin with a framing of Divrei Torah, of words of Torah. I want to begin with a question that is going to sound rhetorical and argumentative. I don't mean it that way. The question is, should there be a Jewish state? I don't mean that question the way it's asked on college campuses. I mean it on an upper level. What does it mean to organize a modern country, government, society, infrastructure that's Jewish? Was it a good idea then? Is it a good idea to perpetuate? Should we be proud of or cringe at the idea that we're trying to run an army and a parliament and all of the things of a modern polity according to Judaism? Does that mean make us theocracy adjacent? The reason why the question has a good answer is, first of all, every society is based on some set of founding principles, and our founding principles are not that bad. And so why should there not be the notion that you could build a society based on our texts, our ideas? Secondly, based on exactly where we are in the Torah reading cycle, it should be lit up right now. For some reason it's not. We're in Parshat Mishpatim. The transition from Parshat Yitro to Parshat Mishpatim is one of the most interesting ancient announcements to society. That revelation at Mount Sinai began with theology, with God, with ritual, with Shabbat, and then very quickly moved to Mishpatim, which is essentially the building blocks of a society. How to do law, how to make an economy that is sustainable, how to treat people and workers and prisoners with a sense of respect and dignity. And even if it's the case that modern Israeli society does not, and I think this is a good thing, follow Parshat Mishpatim verse by verse in setting up what civilization looks like, the underpinning of how a Jew does society has been there from the very beginning. And I think the question that's on many people's minds, those of us who know about and care about the state of Israel, the culture of Israel, the society of Israel, is how are we doing? How will we be doing? Particularly after years of emergency and catastrophe and calamity and loss. And it wasn't so easy even before that. Remember, the months, if not year and a half leading up to October 7th was filled with different turmoil and upheaval. As we reconcile on some level this mega emergency, we go back to the other emergencies that were boiling. And so this is an opportunity to have a conversation with three luminous minds. I do not include myself in that trio of people who are from the Society of Israel, who are incredibly committed to it, and are quite literally trying to rebuild aspects of it from scratch. And I'm so excited to hear and to learn from our guests and speakers tonight. Yuval, and thank you, Yuval, for making this happen, for forcing the issue, for bringing our guests, and for ensuring that our community stays aware of and involved in these issues. Thank you, Yuval.
And thank you, Rabbi Kligfeld, for leading this evening program. Without your deepest love to Israel, we would have been here. Thank you for that. And thank you, Tomer and Omry. I'll introduce them shortly, for coming all the way from Israel to LA, especially to share their insights with our community. Pending on recent developments with Iran, which we're following hourly, Israel is wrapping its longest conflict, the October 7th war. However, there is another war looming, or rather being resumed. I call that the cold civil war we're in right now back in Israel. The elections are on the horizon later this year, probably in October or before. So the war, this cold war, might become warm, even violent. It is a culmination of a social and political tension which cannot be contained anymore. The stitches that held those different sectors in Israel that we're going to talk about are no longer there. However, there is also a path to resolve those tensions peacefully. And there are a few optimistic scenarios which we all hope for. Those are rooted mostly in the people of Israel, such as Tomer, Omry, and others. So the question is, how can we resolve it? Who can lead that solution? We will try to cover those opportunities tonight while not ignoring the risks lying ahead. We gathered this evening because we care. We love Israel, all of us. Some of us are Israelis or have Israeli family or friends. But we're also here because, especially after October 7th, it is clear now that what happens in Israel immediately affects us, the Jewish diaspora. So it's not only about the crossroads Israel is at, it is also about the challenges that we at Temple Beth Am and other guests that came are facing. A few words about the first speaker, Tomer, who will have a fireside chat with Rabbi Kligfeld. Over the past 25 years, Tomer devoted his life to the Israeli public sector. He served as the Director General of the Israeli Homeland Security Ministry. Due to his actions, just as an example, homicide dropped by 17% within a year. That's just an example. Unfortunately, it doubled or more after Tomer left his office, so you probably need to come back soon. Prior to that, Tomer was the COVID czar at the unity government of Netanyahu and Gantz. We'll talk about unity perhaps today. Once Ben-Gvir became the minister, Tomer stepped down, left the government, and founded Rebuilding Israel, Bonim Mechadash, a first-of-kind nonprofit that he'll talk about that shortly. Tomer is married to Dana. They have 3 beautiful children. They live in Givatayim. And 2 last fun facts about Tomer. So the first one is Tomer, I, and Yonatan Rosner's brother from Pressman Academy served together in the same 8200 unit, but we were actually in the same room, you may say. The second fun fact is that when he was 17 years old, he was Israel's champion in 110-meter hurdles sprint.
Not bobsled.
And I couldn't think of a better metaphor for the upcoming conversation with you, Rabbi Kligfeld. So back to you, Rabbi Kligfeld, to talk about the new hurdles Tomer is facing.
Amen. Tomer, Baruch haba, welcome to our community, a community that has a deep love for and relationship with the state and the society of Israel. You and I had a half an hour meeting just yesterday, that had it been 10 times as long, I still wouldn't have run out of my initial questions to ask you. The first question I asked you could take up the rest of the time, and if it does, that's okay. Tell us the story, how you moved from being from inside the government structure to trying to elevate the government process and progress from the outside, what Bonim Mechadash is, why you chose that phrase, and what chances you think it has in actually impacting Israel in 2030, 2040, and 2050. Please, Tomer.
Okay. So good evening, everybody. I just first want to say thank you so much for having this opportunity to speak with you and to meet the community. Special thanks to you, Yuval, for your friendship. We are longtime friends, as Yuval just mentioned. And I've been here since Friday, having a chance to meet many people who are part of this community. And it was, for me, eye-opening. And I learned so much about the bond and the connection that you guys have with Israel and with our society. And I really thank you once again for initiating this and bringing me here to this beautiful place. I'm thinking where to start answering this huge question you asked me. And I think I want to tell you some points in my life. One would be when I had my bar mitzvah on the same Saturday morning where I used to go, I was supposed to Lalot La Torah. There were the first missiles from Iraq. When I was 18, Rabin was assassinated. When I get my first job at the government, it was the Ministry of Education, the Second Lebanon War started. And when my third son, Uri, was born, we started Tzuk Eitan operation. So I'm telling you that because, you know, being an Israeli in my age, or each age, is kind of tangled with so many challenges and events that are taking place.
Can you explain Tzuk Eitan, in case not everyone knows
Tzuk
the phrase?
Eitan is one of the biggest operations that we had in Gaza in 2014, which basically affected a lot of what we are seeing today. But that was, I was telling you that just as an introduction to say that none of that is compared to what we've been through over the past 2 years, 2.5 years. It's been tragic, it's been crazy, it's been, I mean, thinking of our life during that time, running to the shelters almost on a daily basis, from missiles coming from wherever, Yemen, Lebanon, Gaza, Iran, thinking about our hostages on a daily basis, facing loss of life of people that we know on close and far circles, thinking about our economy, about our jobs, thinking about how Israel is being, how Israel is, the new faces of Israel around the world. So many challenges that mixed together in our lives in 2 years' time, and through that trying to keep our life going, you know, to go to send our kids to school, to go to job, to go to work, and try to enjoy every once in a while. So resilience was really, really part of our lives over the past 2 years. But that's only one side of the story, because when the war was over, I think for me and for many other Israelis, it was a time to kind of digest, process what we just went through, not only in the sense of the post-trauma, which is quite big today in Israel. I mean, things are coming up, but also to understand that we cannot do things that we used to do for so many years. We need to change thoroughly some of the fundamentals of Israel. I'll give you some examples for that. On the national security issues, we cannot anymore live with expanding, strengthening enemies on our borders. On the social issues, we can have only part of the society taking part of protecting our country. On the constitutional issues, we can longer be in such a fragile infrastructure of laws or basic laws. On economy, we saw how much we rely on high-tech and technology rather than other parts of economy, and so on and so forth. There are so many questions that rose up through those years, and I think that I speak for myself, but I think I'm speaking for behalf of many Israelis. We can't do things like we did before, and we have to change dramatically some of the anchors, some of the fundamentals that shaped our country for 70 years. But to say that, it's not enough. I mean, stating that we need to do that is not enough. And there was a time, a moment, I think about 2 years ago, just shortly after the war started, that I actually understood that one thing I can bring to the table is to break those ideas into policies, into plans. This is what I do. This is my profession. I'm a public policy person. I'm a professional. This is my work. This is what I've been doing in governments throughout my career. And this is the moment in which me and some of my partners decided to establish Bonim Chadash. Bonim Chadash is an entity, an NGO, a nonprofit that was established 2 years ago in order to make those plans. To say, okay, we need a new contract with the ultra-Orthodox group. Let's make sure that this agreement is going through policies that are well planned, detailed, and written. So what we do basically is thinking very, very thoroughly and in detailed about the day after the war, and a moment in which new policies can come forward, and to convince politicians to take those ideas and those plans to work together towards the future. So basically, this is, I really love the title that you gave to this event today, because this is really a crossroad. There is a really good, optimistic path to the future of Israel. But in order to get there, we need to be well planned. We need to know exactly what we want to do. And we need a government with a good, positive plan to do that. And so my part of the story is to prepare that as good as I can for the political level, politicians to consume it and take it forward. So Bonim Chadash is, when we started, it was December 23, we thought that the elections are going to be very close. We thought we got like 4 or 5 months. So we took like 4, 5, 6 big reforms and worked thoroughly to finish them. But then reality kind of pushed the election forward and forward and forward, and we found a lot of time to expand what we're doing. So today, Bonim Chadash has been planning policies, and when I say policies, I just want to explain, it's not policy papers. It's bills, executive orders, tenders, nominations, everything that needs to be done in order to, as a bureaucrat, I know that, you need to know how the machine works in order to get things done. So this is what we do. But another thing that we do, and that goes to the unity message that Yuval talked about, is to make sure that good ideas are also connecting the parties and connecting the political actors today, not when elections are over, but today, before we are going to this crazy election year that awaits. So we meet politicians on a daily basis, exposing them to very, very professional, detailed ideas in order to get them work together at the next government, which I hope it will be a very positive one for Israel. And I believe that this kind of way of planning it's a very, I would say, it's a key for being able to succeed when a political shift will occur in Israel. So this is what we've been doing over the past 2 years. Most of the people in Bonim Chadash are ex-government people. Most of them, such as myself, are coming from what is called the change government, the government that was prior to that one. And I have to say something about the change government. It was a good one. I mean, it was, for me, I'm not very objective, but it was a good one in the sense that it was very managerial. We kind of held the factory. We make sure that everything works, but it wasn't a government with a positive plan for the future. If you ask people, what's your mission? What's the big mission you're coming with? There was no answer there. Because, it was a 61, 62 fingers government. It was a very fragile coalition, and it was also very dramatically different from what we used to have because of Arab party in the coalition. That was another challenge. So we weren't really thinking about the big picture. It was just about, running the offices as well as we can. And I think that today, again, after the war, there is no more room for just keeping the factory working. We need to think big. And this is what I'm trying to do over the past 2 years, more or less.
Tomer, as you were speaking, so many follow-up questions came up in my mind, so I'm trying to think of which ones to ask. Before I ask the next question, I think, did people get slips of paper on which to write questions when you came in? Was that not handed out? All right. Is Jacob hearing this? Is that possible to do in real time? Just because we know that you're gonna have some questions as well. I'm gonna have some few. If you want to write them down, they'll be given to Yuval and he will determine which of them make the cut. I also want, in case there are those for whom the Hebrew is challenging, just to define what boni mechadash means. Do you have an official English translation? It means building from scratch, building anew.
Rebuilders.
Rebuilders.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the Israeli on the street. And there's no way of knowing this unless maybe you have polled. To what extent, if you asked a person on the street how important it is that the Israeli society not go back to what it has been, but to actually go through potentially cataclysmic change in order to make the next decades possible, is the average Israeli on the street with you, unaware of you, rejecting you because it's too hard, or rejecting you for political inclinations? Do you feel like you have the agreement of the voter, or you're doing this ahead of the voter? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, that's a very good question. It's also very difficult to get a kind of clear answer about that. But I think that we can see, I mean, obviously we're going to election, and we can see how the discourse goes and what are the topics or the subject that most Israelis find relevant and important for the coming elections. And some of them I mentioned, such as the Haredi draft, the national security issues, and some other, and obviously retrospective actions over October 7th are really part of the story. I think we live in a time in which citizens all over the world in liberal democracies want what we call disruptive policies, disruptive delivery. People don't want to wait too much for things to happen. We see it all over the world. And I must say, as a public policy professional, this is a challenge for us professional people. We used to, when we write policies, we think kind of, on a process, for a way of process. There is a problem, there is a solution, there is alternatives, there is data. And today, I think the public all over the world, but now we see it very strongly in Israel, people want answers and fast. And and I find this conversation to be really relevant when I speak with Israeli politicians, because they want thorough reforms, they want disruptive ideas, but they also want it to be very easily messaged. It could be, you have a wonderful plan, I want it to be tweeted in like 20 words or more. And this is, for me, it's a challenge. To kind of play in both kinds of the game. First, to be a professional in an unprofessional world, or to be serious when politics is getting more and more populistic. And so this is kind of a thing that goes through everything that we do. I do think, like the end of the line, that there will be some big topics on election. One of them, which I mentioned before, is obviously the draft for the army. This is kind of tearing us apart. I guess you know that. I guess all of you are kind of following the media, but this is really tearing us apart. Our brothers are not coming to defend the country with us. And also questions about the future of the army, women in the army. It's so many details around it. But what is really, I find interesting about the draft case is that it actually lifted the curtain to a better look on the ultra-Orthodox Haredi world in Israel, about this isolation, about its not being part of the Israeli collective as we want it to be. So it's not just about drafting to the army, it's also about education system, it's about social benefits, it's about employment, it's about taking part in the real life of Israelis. And I think this is today is a fundamental issue that we hear from almost all political players and opinion leaders in Israel. It's not just about the bill that is obviously very controversial, but also about how do we make sure that our brothers are really our brothers. And that is also a very good case for policy, because it's not enough to say, I want you to be part of the society. We want to find the keys in order to do that. So there is a huge work that we're doing and others about those social benefits, for example, about the incentives to go and take part in participating in society and economy. And what do we do with the educational system? I guess you know that, most of you know that the Haredi Orthodox education is private and party-oriented or political-oriented, and not mamlachti like other schools in Israel. So this is a big thing. The private public thing is coming up like never before, through the issue of the war being part of the effort, being part of the protection, being part of the collective. So this is like a huge kind of a snowball that is going down the hill, and I'm pretty sure and pretty optimistic, by the way, that the coming government or the governments, whatever the coalition is going to be, is going to tackle or to address that issue in a kind of historical move. I really, really hope that will happen. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. It won't be a year time or 2 years time before, but it will be a process. But I think that we can't do things like we did on that particular issue, and it's going to be changed.
You mentioned the Haredi community, which is something that we think about a lot. We also think about it in the category of doomsday predictions we sometimes hear about, with demographics pushing the Israeli population in the direction that at some point soon you might legitimately be able to say that fewer than 50% of the voting population in sovereign Israel would self-identify as Zionist. When you think about the Haredi population, the Arab, and maybe some in the far left. And I know you've done a lot of work with the Israeli Arab population as well, including directly with Mansour Abbas. Can you share about what your plans, your policies, and your partnerships with the Israeli Arab community has meant to you, and where you see that possibly going in the future?
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, I have a kind of a really deep connection and thing with the Arab society in Israel, mainly due to my former position when I dealt with crime and violence, which is a monster. I know how much you're familiar with that phenomena, but the Israeli Arab sector is suffering from crime and violence in numbers that are similar to Colombia and Mexico. The homicide rates, protection, blackmail, and whatever. I mean, this is organized crime that has taken over the society. And the reason I'm starting with that is because I think that for us Jews, Israelis, solving that problem for our Arab partners, our Arab citizens, is a key for political partnership or for being part of the collective of Israel. I mean, we need to tackle strongly the real daily problems of our Arab citizens. And I believe that this is a way for us to get closer to, on many, many issues that are usually part of the political dispute. Mansour Abbas, who is the chairman of RAM, was part of the government that I was in. I spent hours with this guy. And I can tell you, he's an amazing guy. I think he's one of the most promising leaders in Israel, and the best partners that the Jewish majority need in order to redefine the relations with the Arab sector. Now, it's not enough to say that, as I said before, and I think one of the keys that are now really, really being put on the table goes back to the Haredi story, because if we are talking about taking part of service, of duty, it raises immediately a question about the Arab sector. What should they do? Should they be part of the army? Most Israelis would not want that. But should they or should they not take part in what we call national service or social service? This is a very good path. Now, in order for the Arab sector to get close to that solution without feeling reluctant or feeling pushed away by the Israeli administration. And for us Jews to be able to say, we want you to be part of that duty, we need to be able to tackle daily problems. So to make that long case, I think that on one hand, the next government should tackle strongly the crime and violence in the Arab sector, and this is possible. I mean, I'm the person who can say this is possible. I did it in 2022, and it is completely possible to do that today. And when we do that, when we take this monster out of the Arab life, I think that there is a very good process that can make a better partnership between Jews and Arabs that also goes to what we call a coalition of servants. I mean, I can think and I can imagine a coalition of servants in which Arabs are also taking part in serving in a different path. So again, this is kind of a blender that we have to put the military service, the ultra-Orthodox issue, the Arab problem, and to get this together to a kind of a joint new agreement about how to participate in protecting and preserving Israel as a safe and prosperous country.
I would imagine you couldn't possibly do this work, Tomer, if you were not an incredibly optimistic person. You're clearly so deeply committed to this, also very humble at the same time, and unless you believed this had a chance of actually impacting society, you couldn't get up in the morning. I'd like to hear a little bit about what fuels that optimism, because so many of us have, I think, a well-earned pessimism about where the society is going. And if you could jump over that fence too, what makes you nervous and pessimistic? Because I would imagine you've been thoughtful in both directions in that regard.
You know, over the past years, I find myself being asked on a daily basis in Shabbat dinners, in meeting with friends, gathering, Tomer, please tell us something optimistic, please. So I kind of decided to take that role and trying to be that one that is saying something good about our future. So first, as I mentioned, going back to what I just said, I think there is a path to the striving of Israel. This is not difficult. Good policies that are taken by future governments can take Israel to a beautiful, beautiful future. Really, I really think so. Now, some other good news. When I speak with the parties, when I speak with politicians, and we got zillion parties, as you know, the gaps are not that big. When you think about problem solving, when you think about the right thing to do, when I speak with different politicians, different political actors, you see that they're shouting outside many things. They are fighting over whatever. They're fighting over symbolic stuff. They're fighting over this voter or that voter. But when you get into the room and you need to get the job done and you need to find a good solution for something, I think most of them will find a way to compromise and to agree and to take us to the right way. So, and because I'm spending so much time with these people, and I'm kind of taking myself off the generator of Twitter and of the media that usually it's very kind of violent and tough, and just thinking problem solving, just thinking the right thing to do, professional policies. This is why I find them very close to each other, and I believe that every kind of centric 2 clicks to the left, 2 clicks to the right, we are there. However, and that's the bad news, and that's the pessimistic side, there is extremism in Israel. There is extremism in Israel, which is dangerous. And it's coming up. And it's part of the government today. And this is dangerous. And this is the part when I think that if those voices will become more prominent, more strong, in the formation of future coalition, then this is time for us to be, I say, concerned, or very much concerned. Now, I don't know what are the chances for that. I mean, those voices are strong, they're growing, but it is still a minority in Israel. And I don't know exactly what will be the results of the next election. I mean, it could be many options. I think most of the options are quite centered, whether it's a next change government or a unity government or some Netanyahu government with center element in it. I mean, all of those options are somewhat moderate. But if we will have the extremist voices leading our politics, then it's bad news, not just for Israel, but for all of us, for American Jewry, for global Jewry, for the future of Israel. And I think maybe I'll take, not really was planning to say that, but now I want to say that I think we have a shared role in pushing the extremists out.
Yeah.
We shouldn't give a room for extremist voices in the Israeli politics, or make them as small as mitigated as possible. This is the only way for us to go back again to a mainstream positive path to the future. So this is kind of my balance between optimism and pessimism. I choose to look at the optimistic path. I think it's right in front of my eyes. I can see that. But we need to make sure that the political powers, whatever will be, will enable that.
As we mentioned in my office when we talked yesterday, that there are many people that I know here in Israel, I put myself in this category, for whom the most unforgivable thing that Netanyahu ever did for the state of Israel was to normalize extremism and Kahanism, which has always been present in society. It hasn't always been present in the government. And the danger that leads both to the internal process in Israel and also to the way people speak about and think about Israel outside. I have one or two more questions, and I know Jacob is collecting some questions, a very small percentage of which Yuval is going to suggest will be said out loud. I also want to take this opportunity, I should have before, to thank Jacob for doing all of the behind-the-scenes work to make sure this happened. This came together rather quickly, Jacob, and thank you for caring so much and for putting so much of yourself into this.
So many notes are coming.
So many notes, yes.
Okay.
Okay, four more. Okay, I have one more before that. You went a little bit in this direction, but I want to push you further. The elephant in the room, the upcoming elections. I do not want to put you on the table in terms of where you think it ought to go, even though I know I'm sure you have a preference. But can you analyze the possibilities? What are the likely outcomes, and what would be good or bad in your eyes, given the different outcomes of this election? Is the election actually going to happen when it's scheduled? Give us a little bit to hold on to.
Well, I'm sure some of you, or even most of you, are kind of following the polls, the surveys of the mandates, and the situation is quite frozen, I would say, over the past year or so, in which Netanyahu's coalition, the current coalition, is around 50 mandates. The opponents, the opposition, is around 57, 59, 58, and we have around 10 to 12 mandates of Arab parties. This is basically the situation, and it's not moving that much. Iran war didn't change much. Qatar Gate didn't change. I mean, it's quite stable. So first, I don't know if that will be the case, but it gives kind of a clue of what are we going to have as elections are approaching. One possibility, one scenario is to have the change government once again with Bennett and his partners, and that means another, again, an Arab party in the coalition. This is a big debate in Israel.
It's a big debate inside Bennett's head, and this in this sanctuary. He spoke, about 14 months ago, and that question was specifically addressed to him. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
And he said he believed in it then, and he could believe in the future, aval lo achshav. He says he would not be comfortable in the moment that Israel and Zionism is under attack to bring the Arab party into the government itself.
Okay, I mean, this again, I think Bennett and others, Lieberman and Lapid and others are also kind of expressing their views about that pretty much in the same direction. And I think, I mean, I personally find the change government to be very, very effective and positive. I mentioned that before, but I cannot deny the fact that the fear of Israelis from Arab partnership after October 7th is authentic. It's real. I mean, people are afraid, people are scared, and this is authentic. So I don't know what will happen, but this is one option that will lead to a pretty much stable government, being a change government. The second option, which I think is, for me, the one that is with best chances today to happen, is what we call the unity government. It means that Netanyahu on one hand and Bennett on the other hand, probably Bennett, will form a government. And the basic idea of that government will be no extremists. So no Haredi, no Arabs, no Ben Gvir, and I don't know how many mandates do we get, do we count in this particular option, but this is around 70 plus. This is something that is very much appealing to Israelis. I think many Israelis, including left-center people who really dislike Netanyahu, they say, we just don't want to get what we just got over the past 3 years, so I'm ready to swallow the frog again. And I think this is a very possible option, but we have to remember that the mistrust between the parties and their experience with Netanyahu is a thing. I mean, they're carrying scars of political, not really completing the agreements that they had together. I'm trying to be very soft. So there's a trust issue of that unity government, but as a story, as a narrative for Israelis, I think it's a very good story. We don't need the extremists anymore. We need to join forces after the crisis that we went through, and let's get 70, 80, 60-something Zionist votes to take us to the future. Could really happen. And there is another option of Netanyahu government with some element. I mean, currently he doesn't have the numbers, but he may be able to convince some party from the other side to be part of it. And then we have a right-wing government with Haredi and Ben Gvir and others in it, which is pretty much similar to the government that we have today, but with some click to the center. I think this is basically the cards today, but again, I'm trying to be very, very modest about that, because things can change, and campaigns are actually just starting now. If you're now opening, some of you, I guess, are on Twitter or in the media, we're in election. Videos are all over the place, statements, promises. We're going to demand this ministry, we're going to demand that the ministry. The politicians are out there, rallies all over the place. So we're in election year, and I think it's kind of started, though we don't know the date yet. But I think things are warming up. We feel it, and also last thing about the election, that it could be, I mean, there is a part of me being a bit afraid of kind of a violent election, because everything is up. I mean, everything is kind of Emotions are increasing. The polarization is there. I guess you know that. So and the messages are getting more and more kind of strong, I would say. So it could be the case that we're gonna have a turbulent kind of a campaign in a scenario that we haven't seen before, and I'm pretty much afraid of that.
In terms of the middle option you described, a government with no extremists, we'd all have to agree on what is and what is not an extremist, and that would be an interesting conversation of itself. I know that everyone in this room would want to listen to you for many, many hours, and we have a part 2 of this program that we want to get to as well. Let me ask one last question from one of the questions that was submitted, and thank you everyone for submitting a question, and then we'll move to part 2. What would you say is the probability of the Israeli society ever moving in the direction of an actual constitution and moving to a form of elections that's more a constituency-based elections? Is it a pipe dream? Is it possible? Do you think it should happen?
I think that a full constitution is a project that will be almost impossible to complete in Israel due to legal issues such as occupation. This is a thing that is, and also disagreements. However, there is a very strong effort today to set the rules of the game. When you say constitution is many things. Is structure, is election, is high court, it's human rights, and so many other things. So I think that after having what we were having with the judicial overhaul or reform, there is a quite strong understanding that at least the first level of constitutional rules of the game should be anchored differently. So there is a huge effort and reforms. Some of that was written by us about what should be the process for basic laws, which is today unstructured at all. I guess, and if you know that, but in Israel you can pass a basic law with one finger at the Knesset, that's it. And also in the high court part, being able to dismiss some of the legislation of the Knesset could be today with a call of low-level court, any low-level court. This is kind of crazy flexibility in both sides, both the Knesset and both the high courts and the courts. And I think that there is a big and huge understanding that those clocks need to move together to a more kind of structured form. But these are only the rules of the game. I'm not talking about nationality law. I'm not talking about equality. I'm not talking about freedom of speech, which is not constitutionalized in Israel, as you know, and many other layers. But the first floor needs to be completed. So, and I think so. To answer your question, I believe, or I want to believe, that in the coming years we'll be able to form this first floor. Which is good, and we really miss that. And maybe that will set the line, or will give us a direction to the next levels of constitution. But one big project, I can't see it happening in the coming years.
Tomer, I mean every word of this when I say thank you for devoting your life and your work essentially to Parshat Mishpatim, and for what you're doing for Medinat Yisrael and Am Yisrael. Thank you, Tomer.
Thank you so much.
I want to open with an apology. I think we got more questions than people, and we had only one slot, so apologies for that. We will try to answer some of the questions that were asked in Tomer's session, in Omry's session as well, because some of them were related to economics and quality of life in Israel. So I'll start with introducing Omry. Thank you again for coming all the way from Israel. It's just a 15-hour flight. Omry, for almost a decade, is a partner at Viola. Viola is the biggest tech investment firm in Israel with over $6 billion under management, still growing, still raising. In his role, Omry works very closely with mostly Israeli entrepreneurs who build AI and financial tech, fintech startups. Omry helped to build, for example, Pandalogic, which was sold to Veritone. He supported a startup called Clarizen, which was acquired by Planview. He's working very closely with Lightrix, which is a very famous Jerusalem-based unicorn. And prior to joining this the biggest tech platform, he spent with his family 10 years in New York. After graduating from Columbia Business School, he joined Goldman Sachs. He was an investment banker, worked on huge US technology and telecommunication deals. And Omry is not a graduate of 8200, which is quite unique for tech people. Leads me to the fun fact about Omry, which is not actually fun, but rather more serious. When Omry was very young, his family relocated to Germany, and Omry, speaking 4 languages, finished high school in Frankfurt, and then he was accepted to one of the best law schools in the world, not in Israel, in the UK actually. But he made a decision not to move on, rather come back to Israel and join the IDF. He became a company commander in one of Israel's top elite units. So thank you for serving us there and in reserves. Omry is married to Sharon, an American Israeli, and they have 3 children. They live in Ra'anana. Omry, first question from my end, and then we'll go to some of the questions that we got earlier. In your day-to-day, you eat, drink, breathe the Israeli tech industry. How have you, your family, partners, colleagues, peers experienced the past few years living in Israel?
Great. So first of all, I'd like to echo Tomer and thank you all for hosting us. This is a privilege to be here, an honor. And also, I saw the engagement of the audience. It was incredible. I saw the number of questions that come in. And usually in those types of forums, maybe the 1 person, 2 people kind of raising their hands and asking a question, and there were literally tens of them. So it's amazing. Before I address your question, Yuval, and thank you again for doing this. My perspective is different from Tomer's, right? I think you'll find a more optimistic view. I'm a venture capitalist. We are paid to be optimistic. So my perspective is going to be around investments and tech. And I think Israel really shines there. But before we go there, I do want to address what have we experienced also from the kind of the tech ecosystem since October 7th. Before I said that, I want to give you a little bit of a backdrop. So as Yuval mentioned, about 9 years ago, we moved back to Israel. Okay, so I have 3 children, all born in the US on the East Coast, so don't blame us for this. And I was an investment banker, so don't blame me for that as well. But we chose as dual citizens, I'm sure many in the audience are, to move back to Israel and literally experience or do as I'm gonna preach, quote unquote, right? So not just drink the Kool-Aid, but actually move back with the family and experience this firsthand. And it's first and foremost, it's a choice. So I want to, with this backdrop, take you back to obviously October 7th of 23. So it's a Saturday, as you know. It's Simchat Torah, as you also know. 6:30 in the morning, alarm, all goes off, and nobody knows what's happening. My youngest, Noah, she was 10 at the time. She comes and she wakes us up. And like, Dad, there's an alarm. I'm like, no, go to sleep. We just moved the house. Maybe it's one of the neighbors. Like, who knows? And the alarms just keep on going, and nobody understands what's happening. And you kind of wake up and you turn on the television. And in the beginning, I remember thinking, oh, I just hope nobody gets killed and nobody gets kidnapped. And then obviously, as the day progresses, you realize, like, what's happening? And from a personal point of view, you can't just sit and do nothing. I no longer do reserves, okay, too old for that. But you can't just sit at home. So I ended up on a personal level, there were like WhatsApp groups and going and picking up a soldier from Chulon who was at the Nova party. He's studying in Be'er Sheva, in the university there. So he went to Be'er Sheva, picked his stuff, went to his parents' house in Holon, and I take him from Holon all the way up north, because at the time, we thought as Israelis that this is going to be like a multi-front type of thing. Thankfully, it didn't end up that way, but I remember going and literally it felt like a war zone. There were hundreds of cars waiting, people like buses kind of taking everybody that were enlisted at the same Saturday. And I remember driving back home and saying, wow, the world just changed. But I don't want to just share the personal perspective. It's also about, as I mentioned, kind of the tech or the Israeli type of perspective. So we grew up, all of us, thinking, Israel is like one of the strongest armies in the world. We have the best 8,200. We have, a great intelligence. How on earth can we be surprised as much as we were on that Saturday at 6:30 in the morning, having 3,000 people literally just breaking a fence and coming into our houses to people, kidnapping them in their, pajamas from their homes. And this, I think, was when we got literally hit in the face, because you lose a lot of what you kind of grew up with around this confidence in your military, in your intelligence, in your self-security, all of a sudden in one day vanishes. And I remember, not just me, but many people, I didn't touch a gun for a long time. And I remember saying, look, my fiduciary is to protect my family. So I also applied for a gun. It's in the safe at home now. I never use it, but it's one of the things to describe like what happened in that day. And then we entered a catastrophic year, I would say, like a huge tragedy. That day we had 15 to 20% of the tech workforce was enlisted, not just the tech, of any type of workforce, right? So there are about 4 million people working in the workforce in Israel, 10% is tech. In our portfolio companies, 15 to 20% of those people were enlisted. So obviously there was a huge disruption to what is happening. And I want to take, fast forward a year because it's important. I think when we got our confidence back as Israelis, and again, coming back to tech, is, I don't know if you remember this, but in September of 24, so almost a year after, there was this beeper operation in Lebanon. And that's when the pendulum swung. That's finally we said, okay, we have some James Bond stuff happening that we're planned. And this is the military we knew, right? This is the Mossad, this is technology, these are things that, element of surprise, et cetera, that was amazing. And then, some other, thank you. And then some other crucial things happened. Of course, we had, in June of 25, we had a 12-day war with Iran. We weren't alone in that. We had, obviously, the US helping us, and that was a big boost to the self-confidence and to where we are today. And we'll touch on the kind of the tech metrics and where Israel is. But I must say, without getting into politics, because I have a lot to say about this current government, as Tomer mentioned. But I think today, we went through a terrible tragedy, and Israel is still under like a PTSD. Really, we talked about this in terms of suicide rates and the way kind of Israel operates. But if you kind of look at what the country accomplished in the last 2+ years in terms of what's happening with Hezbollah in Lebanon, right? Kind of pushing them out and supposed to get disarmed. What happened with the Assad regime in Syria that is coming down. What happened with Iran with the nuclear threat that is not just on Israel. I think it's like a global threat. There are a lot of reasons to be optimistic. We had all the hostages coming back. We were always afraid of a Ron Arad situation, as you know, that people, even our fallen, are not coming back. And we had Rani Gvili, the last one, return a couple of weeks ago. So again, putting the more optimistic, despite the strategy that we've gone through, Israel is geopolitically, I would say, is in a better spot today than we were. And I promise I'll get to an optimistic end of answer every point I can.
Thank you, Omry. This is very encouraging. You mentioned the Israeli entrepreneurs, and I think they're very well known for a secret sauce that they have unmatched to their peers here in the US or in Europe. Do you think that the war enhanced that or changed that in a way? Yeah. What do you see working with them?
Yeah, so first of all, as investors, just so you know, 80% of the capital that is invested in us is non-Israeli. okay, not Israeli, not Jewish. We have, large endowments and pension funds, et cetera, that are seeing what we are seeing, right, in this Israeli innovative tech ecosystem, the ability to get great financial returns and create kind of global category leaders in the tech industry out of our small, island economy with 10 million people. Before the war, we used to sell two things. We used to sell resiliency, right? We always say the Israeli entrepreneur is resilient. He or she are agile to find new problems, et cetera. And I think the war kind of proved with flying colors that resiliency is part of who we are and what we are. So that's point number one. And point number two, because the Israeli market is so small, you should know this. Basically, we invest in Israeli innovation, but the go-to-market is typically starts here in the U.S., right? Because culturally, there are large similarities between the Israeli culture and the U.S. culture. And because Israel is such a small market, most startups will go to the U.S. and sell their products, whether they're typically kind of B2B, right? So businesses to businesses types of enterprises, and we can touch on that as well. But I think the war and the conflict also elevated two new things. One is it elevated the Israeli culture, for better or worse. So, the Israelis, first of all, other than resiliency, they're very, failure, for example, is an option in the Israeli culture, right? Or if the door is closed, you'll try to get through the window. And you want to be very agile in problem solving. And sometimes you also want to cut corners, which is not great. But this is part of the culture that you basically say, hey, how come my CEO is the CEO? I can do a better job than the CEO, right? You have that type of mentality. And we saw that kind of culture, which I like, about being aspirational, being aggressive or assertive, depending on which direction you're coming out of, really shine through even more. And the second, maybe even the bigger thing is, people that went into this conflict and saw the atrocities that happened there, they come back, or they saw this on TV, or it's a life-changing event, right? So they basically say, okay, we understand life has changed, we got a new perspective, we want to make an impact. We want to do things that are greater than what we've done up to this point. And maybe we've identified a big problem in the battlefield, or a huge kind of void, or a shortage in something, and we want to create a solution. Again, coming back to this culture thing, we want to create a solution for those types of problems that we saw, and that's part of the reason why you see the defense tech in Israel really shining right now.
Yeah, defense tech is growing because of the defense industries that are boosting. I want to keep the optimistic notion.
Please, yeah, good.
More questions. I think that if we're following what happens in the markets over the past week or two, we see how the markets acknowledge the disruption of AI, and everything is changing. Now, on one hand, it risks Israeli companies because they are software-based companies and they're losing their assets because of AI. But you can also say it's an opportunity because innovation and AI go together, and innovation and AI should happen in Israel. So how do you see that? What do you see in the market in Israel in this cloudy environment?
Do you think I'm going to be pessimistic or optimistic?
Very optimistic.
So, but I'm going to be optimistic. But let's take again a step back, because I think it's important to kind of understand that since the tech industry really started, I would say kind of in and about the year 2000, there are always innovation platforms that basically facilitate growth and innovation and new technologies. Okay, so I want to take you back to, let's say, the year 2000. The internet is coming out, right? I remember growing up in Frankfurt in 1995 in a library. There was like this first computer, and it says World Wide Web, and you go in and there's like a Netscape, right? Like a browser, and you start searching, etc. But I think really with 2000, with obviously the internet boom and then bust, we realized the internet is very good about communicating, for example, right, with emails. About e-commerce was introduced for the first time, and we had access to information that we didn't have access to before, and that created an influx of innovation, right? Then 2008 came. 2008 was a beautiful year, other than, of course, the financial crisis. It was a beautiful year because Facebook came out of campuses, right? Cloud came out of Amazon, right? So you had basically social network. You had cloud, and Apple introduces the iPhone. And that's when you had distribution all of a sudden between, and by the way, part of the reason we have polarization is because of these social networks. But from 2008, you had, again, a huge influx of applications, right? Which reached some sort of a plateau, because think about today, when was the last time you actually downloaded an app that you use on a daily basis? It doesn't happen that often. And then came, ChatGPT with OpenAI, right, about three years ago. And yet again, another platform that creates a ton of influx and a ton of innovation. And the different thing about AI is that it's not just giving you access to information or communication or distribution. AI actually does things for you, whether they're supervised, right, so you can accept or reject, or unsupervised, where you start seeing some Terminator type of futures that are being laid out. But at the end of the day, AI is a massive opportunity for all of us, not just to disrupt the videos that we are making, how it started, right, with marketing, not just that you can have a bot that does your support, but AI, to your point, is now replacing software. So horizontal software, you basically have models that are commoditized, right? You think about Gemini, as you say here, I guess. You have ChatGPT, you have Claude, etc. And you can basically ask those engines, hey, build me a Salesforce, build me an enterprise like an ERP system, build me a Monday.com, etc. And it actually works pretty well. Where we identify the opportunities in Israel is not about building those foundational models that really require a massive amount of capital, where Israel is not kind of excellencing in the same way that Israel did not produce the big cloud companies, right, like AWS and Google, etc. And we also don't see much opportunity on the horizontal software because of the lack of moats, as we said. It's very easy to replicate, right? It's not something you can defend in the long term. But here's an example I can use here. Think about the legal work, right? The law work. If you look at all the revenue pool of legal work, it's about $1 trillion, okay? $1 trillion of revenue pool, from your admin to your paralegal to maybe some in the audiences, the partner in a law firm that charges, pick your price, $3,000 an hour for their services. That entire $1 trillion industry has 2% software penetration, okay? 98% is about labor, exactly. And think about LLM, large language models, that are very much a typical use case for law. And even if you swing the pendulum from 2% to, let's say, 10%, by doing some of this work, from qualification of a lead, case drafting, engagement with the client, etc., you've just created $100 billion type of market. And we see that type of vertical AI in many different industries. And that's, again, why I'm very optimistic that this will be something that is generating innovation and progress and not hindering it.
That's a great review. Thank you. I do want to say that you didn't mention that, but 2025 was an amazing year for Israeli tech.
Yes.
Capital was poured into the Israeli economy through the war.
Correct.
The Israeli tech is the locomotive that leads the Israeli economy. Mm-hmm. And the Israeli tech leaders are very powerful. Yeah, I'm saying that thank you. I'm saying that the Israeli tech leaders are very powerful in the public arena. Now, if you go before the war, 3 years back, through what we can call the judicial reform or judicial overhaul, depending on which side you are, we saw something that we've not seen ever. We saw business leaders, specifically from the tech industry, taking a very hard stance and position, risking potentially their reputation or the other way around. Why is that? Why that specific judicial overhaul or reform changed or revealed something about the DNA of Israeli tech entrepreneurs, leaders, etc.?
Yeah, the short answer is that the Israeli tech ecosystem, which is, again, more than 20% of GDP, more than 50% of exports, it really is the locomotive of the Israeli industry, has, it likes visibility. it likes certainty. It likes an independent judicial system that if something goes wrong, if there's something around your intellectual property, if there's something around, a case where you feel you've been treated dishonestly, if there is something around an M&A, right, a merger and acquisition of an Israeli company, that if something goes wrong, there is a judicial system or a court system that will take care of it and will treat you in a very fair manner, as it should be in a democracy and everywhere else. And you're spot on. I think, again, it's all about perspective. COVID was a huge boom to tech. And then in 2022, there was obviously the interest rates in the US came up really dramatically, right, over a short period of time, which made the public industry or the tech ecosystem basically plunge. In 2023, because of this judicial overhaul, it was the first time in the tech industry where we saw a divergence between the Israeli tech shrinking, contracting, but the US tech starting to see a recovery. And we obviously attribute it to what was happening in Israel because it attracted less foreign buyers and less foreign capital to come into Israel. I mentioned what happened later on. I think in the second half, or more in Q4 of 24, we started seeing the ramp up of Israeli tech. And to your point, Yuval, you should notice in 2025, it was an amazing year for Israel. So let's start with even macro. So first of all, the Israeli shekel is as strong as it's ever been. I know the US dollar is weakening globally, but in Israel, it really went across the board. The Tel Aviv Stock Exchange was up 50%, 50%, better than any other stock exchange. And how we measure risk in Israel from a macro perspective, the credit default swaps have actually come down to before October 7th level. And we see the rating agencies coming out and say, okay, we're no longer kind of a negative forecast, etc. On the private markets, $14 billion were invested in Israeli startups, mostly foreign capital that is coming in. The best year since 2021, right? Since the hype year of 2021. And in M&A, $75 billion worth of acquisitions. The best year ever, even better than 2021. So again, the optimistic side, I hope you don't blame me for this, but think about a country that has just gone through judicial overhaul, 2+ years of a conflict, of war, of sirens, of everything that we've experienced, really a catastrophe, and you're exiting 2025 with such a strong year from a kind of a very objective type of metrics, and now the world kind of sees us in that strength. And I think that's a lot to be proud of, to be honest, for all of us in this room, as Jews, as Israelis. And we can talk about, kind of the short answer. Do I think, Israel needs to exist for all of us, for diaspora, for the Israelis? I think the short answer is definitely yes. And we can talk about this as well, but we have a lot to be thankful for, also as people live in Israel, for you, for the communities that live abroad, that I know how much you have done on October 7th, how much you have sacrificed. I know there are family members here. I've met a few over the last couple of days here that have kids that serve in the military, that have volunteered, that have donated a lot of capital and that care about Israel and all the initiatives. And I think the more we have that type of support from the outside in, but also from Israeli entrepreneurs that are trying to come in here and be successful, I think the stronger we become as people and as a community. And I think that's something that we should all be very proud of, what we have all accomplished in the last 2+ years out of this terrible tragedy.
I want to connect the dots to the previous session with Rabbi Kligfeld and Tomer, and looking at your optimism. Let's talk about the Israeli society participation in the labor market. Do you think that within a decade from now you will see ultra-Orthodox, hearty entrepreneurs building tech companies, coming out of 8200 service and forming those partnerships?
Elon Musk said it, not me, that he puts it in a very eloquent way that, demographics is destiny, right? So, to the point earlier that was made, if 50% of the population is not in the, the servant or the serving population, we have a big issue. I think we have a big issue in Israel right now, all right? We have a big issue around polarization. We have a big issue of how do we make the different groups in Israel to contribute in a more fair manner, because at the end of the day, you can't have 10 or 20% of the population basically support the other 80% in a country that is mostly socialist in the type of services that it provides to its population. And we have to be more inclusive in order for our country to succeed. And that includes bringing in the Orthodox Jews. By the way, that also includes having women more involved in the tech industry than they are today. I have a son and 2 daughters. As a father, as a member of the community, I think it's very important to see more of that. And also there were discussions that I agree with, that we need to have the Arab Israeli population contributing in their form as well. I actually think we see a shift. It's not a big shift yet. It's a very small shift, but we do see a shift of, pick of an example, the Orthodox Jews are becoming more involved in what we see in terms of being part of the workforce, being part of the serving, the servant population, as it was called here. But on that answer, I have reasons to believe we need to be optimistic, only because we have to solve this. Otherwise, it's like an insolvent type of a problem if we don't solve it in the near future. And I agree with Tomer. I think the next government, in the 3 possibilities that they articulated much better than I did, or I could, I think we're going to see a bigger shift towards more inclusiveness and towards Orthodox serving in the military, contributing more, 8,200 combat units, and everything in between to make us a better, more inclusive, more united society that will take us for the next 75 plus years.
Thank you, Omri. I think, I want to use this very optimistic notion to conclude our conversation. I find it refreshing to have an Israeli speaking about Israel with a smile, with optimism, spirit. You have to be optimistic, as you say. This is your line of business, but I think it comes from a very authentic and personal place. I mean, you have bet on Israel twice in your life. You came to serve in the army, and then you came again with your family to live your life and work there with your American family. Basically, you came back to Israel. So you follow your beliefs in your actions. So thank you for that, and thank you, Omri, again for coming all the way from Israel. And I'm bringing it back to you, Rabbi Kligfeld, to wrap the evening.
First, please give us your wiring instructions so we can take the entire Temple Beth Am endowment and invest it with you. That would, I think, would be a very good idea. I do want to thank all of you for being here tonight. Your presence here and these numbers reminds us that we should do more programming exactly like this. I mean, not exactly, but in this category. And really thank you, Yuval, for seeing the need for that and making sure that we did this. And I know it's not a small thing to come from Israel to Los Angeles for this kind of gathering. And it is the case that evenings have to end, and had this program been 3 or 4 times as long, I think everyone would have stayed and waited on every word. It's entirely up to you both if you want to linger after were done formally. I'm sure there'll be people who will have questions for you, and you will not be insulting anyone if you call the night a night, and you will be delighting people if you are able to answer some questions in more private settings. I'll end with a piece of Torah because that's what I do for a living. You do different things for a living than I do. So I'm just looking at our Parsha panels and are moving from Parshat Mishpatim, where we began the night, to next week's Parsha, which is Parshat Shuma. And the most iconic pasuk from that Parsha is when God says, V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tucham, saying to the people, build me something holy, and then maybe I will have a chance to dwell within it, within you. That operates on a spiritual level. It also operates on a civic and a financial level. You need good, honest, ethical, optimistic people who believe in society and believe in the Jewish society in Israel to build something that can hold our national aspirations and can hold the kaleidoscope of ways that the modern Israel presents itself as. And I want to thank you for really dedicating your time, your life, your capital to building a mikdash that we all feel we live within, even from as far away as Los Angeles. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Also, there's food in the ballroom for everyone.